The nights on Conrad's farm were usually calm, wrapped in a blanket of silence broken only by the occasional chirp of crickets or the distant rustle of leaves. But one night, that tranquility was disrupted by a faint, rhythmic noise emanating from the barn. At first, Conrad dismissed it. Living in the countryside, strange noises weren't uncommon. Probably the wind, he muttered to himself, rolling over in bed and shutting his eyes. But the noise didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, it grew more persistent and peculiar. It wasn't just rustling or random creaks of wood. It was deliberate, a soft tapping sound that echoed in the stillness, almost like footsteps in a carefully timed rhythm. Conrad tried to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of him. One morning, he decided to check the barn. As he approached, something felt off. The barn door, which he distinctly remembered locking the night before, was slightly ajar. Inside, the scene was unusual. The hay, usually stacked neatly, was scattered in odd patterns across the floor. A trail of hoofprints zigzagged through the barn, but not in the way a restless horse would pace. It was almost like a deliberate dance. Strange, Conrad mumbled, shaking his head. He double-checked the latch and left, chalking it up to his own forgetfulness. But deep down, he knew he wasn't the type to leave a door unlocked or a chore half done. As the days passed, neighbors started noticing strange happenings too. Mrs. Clark, who lived a few fields over, mentioned seeing shadows darting around the barn late at night. Another neighbor swore they heard faint, rhythmic sounds that resembled music. First, Conrad laughed it off. The idea of a horse playing music or creating rhythms was ridiculous. People have wild imaginations, he told himself. But the evidence continued to pile up. On one particularly restless night, Conrad stayed up, sitting by the window with a cup of tea. The moon cast a pale glow over the barn, and for a while, everything seemed still. Then, out of nowhere, there it was again, a faint tapping sound. Conrad's eyes widened. It wasn't his imagination. Something was happening in that barn. The next morning, Conrad decided to investigate more thoroughly. He carefully inspected Zephyr, his prized black stallion, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Zephyr was calm and obedient as always, his soulful eyes giving away no hint of mischief. Yet Conrad couldn't shake the feeling that the answers lay with him. Conrad finally decided he needed proof. Borrowing a wildlife camera from a friend, he set it up discreetly in a corner of the barn. "If there's something going on, this will catch it," he muttered, though part of him doubted he'd find anything at all. That night, as he lay in bed, his heart raced with a mix of anticipation and unease. Hours dragged by until the first rays of sunlight peeked through his window. With trembling hands, he retrieved the camera and plugged it into his computer. What he saw next made his breath catch. The footage didn't just solve the mystery. It unveiled something so extraordinary that even Conrad struggled to believe his own eyes. Conrad had always shared a special bond with horses. His love for them began in his younger years as a cavalryman, where he spent most of his life in the military. In the chaos of war and battles, Conrad found solace in the strength and loyalty of his steeds. His horses were his constant companions through thick and thin, never failing to stand by his side in times of danger, always providing a sense of calm in the face of adversity. Over time, he learned that a horse was more than just a beast of burden. They were incredibly intuitive, almost otherworldly in their ability to sense emotions, read their rider's body language, and mirror their thoughts. It was a connection beyond words, one that felt more like a deep understanding shared between two souls. After retiring from the military and seeking a quiet life away from the hustle and bustle of the world, Conrad moved to a small, secluded farm in the countryside. The peace and solitude of the land offered him a much-needed respite, but something was missing. He longed for the companionship of a horse once more, for that unspoken connection, that feeling of trust that only a horse could offer. So, after much thought, he decided it was time to find a new partner. It didn't take long before he came across Zephyr. The black stallion was unlike any horse Conrad had seen before. His glossy coat shimmered under the sunlight, a stark contrast against the green pastures of the farm. His eyes, amber and sharp, seemed to see beyond the surface, like they were staring into the very depths of Conrad's heart. There was an almost mystical aura about him, a quiet intelligence that left Conrad with an unexplainable sense of awe. The moment their eyes met, it felt as if something deep within Conrad resonated with Zephyr. Without hesitation, Conrad decided that Zephyr was meant to be his companion. The two became inseparable. Life on the farm was peaceful, and Conrad quickly settled into a comfortable routine with his new horse. Every morning, Conrad would tend to his farm, while Zephyr grazed peacefully in the fields. In the afternoons, they'd spend hours together, sometimes riding across the rolling hills, while other times Conrad would simply sit beside Zephyr, letting the horse's calm presence wash over him. They developed a deep, silent connection, one where words were unnecessary. Zephyr would nuzzle Conrad's hand when he needed comfort or rest his head on his shoulder when Conrad was lost in thought. There was something almost spiritual about the bond they shared, a mutual understanding that felt timeless and irreplaceable. By day, Zephyr was the epitome of calm and obedience. He moved gracefully through the fields, his hooves striking the earth with the precision of a seasoned athlete. His sleek black coat glistened under the sun, and Conrad often marveled at how well-trained and disciplined Zephyr was. Neighbors often commented on how well-behaved Zephyr was, remarking that he was the most regal-looking horse they had ever seen. He was the pride of the farm, a symbol of strength, beauty, and elegance. But as the sun began to set and the night descended over the farm, a subtle shift seemed to take place in Zephyr. It was almost as if the night air brought out a different side of him, a more mysterious energy. He would stand by the barn with his ears perked up, his body tense, his eyes darting around as if sensing something in the shadows. Conrad had always chalked it up to the natural instincts of a horse. After all, they were prey animals, always on alert at night. But there was something more to it, something Conrad couldn't quite put his finger on. At times, Zephyr would pace restlessly around the barn or paw at the ground as though something was bothering him. On a few occasions, Conrad had noticed that the horse seemed to be staring into the darkness as if waiting for something to appear. Still, Conrad ignored it, thinking it was just a horse's natural behavior, and life continued on in its peaceful rhythm. What Conrad didn't know, though, was that Zephyr wasn't just restless. He was hiding something that would soon become the talk of the town and would forever change the way Conrad viewed his beloved horse. As the days went by, the strange occurrences on the farm began to grow more frequent and more unsettling. Conrad had always prided himself on his ability to keep things in order, but no matter how meticulously he checked the barn, something didn't feel right. It started with the barn doors. Every morning, without fail, Conrad would find the heavy wooden doors slightly ajar, as though someone or something had opened them during the night. He would chalk it up to the wind or the barn shifting with age, but each time it happened, it gnawed at his confidence. One evening, Conrad decided to stay up later than usual, hoping to catch whatever might be causing the disturbances. As the clock struck midnight, he heard the first of the strange sounds. It was a soft tapping, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from the direction of the barn. Conrad froze, listening intently. It was almost like someone was gently knocking on the barn wall. His heart began to race as the tapping continued, growing slightly louder. He strained his ears, trying to identify the source, but it wasn't a sound that could easily be explained. Curious, but still skeptical, Conrad grabbed his flashlight and made his way cautiously to the barn. As he walked, he felt an unease in the pit of his stomach. The moonlight bathed the farm in an eerie glow, casting long shadows across the fields. When he reached the barn, he took a deep breath and opened the door, fully expecting to find nothing but Zephyr, calmly chewing hay in the corner as he always did. But that wasn't the case. The barn was empty, save for the odd scene before him. Hay was scattered across the floor in strange, intricate patterns. The usually pristine stalls were disturbed, the bedding tossed about as if something or someone had been pacing back and forth in the night. But there was no sign of Zephyr. Conrad's heart skipped a beat. Where was Zephyr? He searched the barn thoroughly, checking every corner. It wasn't like him to wander off at night. Conrad's pulse quickened. Had someone been tampering with the barn? Or was it Zephyr himself who was causing the disturbances? The more he thought about it, the more certain he became that something unusual was happening. And it wasn't just the work of a wandering animal. The nagging feeling of being watched began to creep in, and the more Conrad thought about it, the more convinced he became that Zephyr was hiding something. Something he couldn't yet understand. After weeks of growing suspicion and sleepless nights, Conrad finally made the decision to get to the bottom of the mystery. He needed answers, and he was determined to find them. The strange disturbances, the eerie sounds, and Zephyr's unsettling behavior at night. None of it made sense. Could it really be the wind? Or was something more sinister at play? There was only one way to find out. Conrad knew that if he was going to uncover the truth, he needed concrete evidence. So he turned to an old military trick he had used in the past: surveillance. His old friend, Henry, had once worked as a wildlife photographer and had a collection of high-quality motion sensor cameras. When Conrad explained his situation, Henry was more than willing to lend him one. "If there's something strange going on, this camera will catch it," Henry assured him. The camera was simple enough to set up. It was motion-activated, and it would record anything that moved within range, day or night. Conrad carefully placed it in a corner of the barn, making sure it was hidden from view but would still capture everything inside. He tested it a few times, ensuring it was positioned just right, then armed it for the night. As the camera blinked to life, Conrad stepped back and gave it one last look. "Let's see what you're really up to, Zephyr," he muttered under his breath. He locked the barn door behind him, the familiar sound of the bolt sliding into place offering a small measure of comfort. That night he retired to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. His mind raced with anticipation, wondering what the camera might reveal. Would it be nothing at all? Or would the footage expose the truth he wasn't ready to face? Conrad sat in stunned silence, his fingers frozen on the mouse, as the footage continued to unfold before him. Zephyr, the horse he had come to know as calm, obedient, and somewhat predictable, was revealing a side of himself that was beyond anything Conrad could have ever imagined. The rhythmic movement, the grace, the precision. It all seemed too surreal to believe. He had to remind himself to breathe, unsure whether what he was seeing was real or some kind of dream. The camera had captured something extraordinary. It wasn't just a simple dance or a strange series of movements. It was a performance. Zephyr seemed to be moving through an elaborate sequence of steps, each one flowing seamlessly into the next. His hooves lifted from the ground in a deliberate, almost calculated fashion, as though each movement was part of a larger design. The barn, dimly lit in the footage, became the stage, and Zephyr was the star, performing an act that had Conrad completely captivated. But then, as if to prove that this wasn't some fluke, the footage took an even stranger turn. After completing the movements that seemed like an intricate dance, Zephyr paused for a moment, his head tilting slightly to one side. He seemed to be listening, waiting for something, or someone, and then a faint sound could be heard on the recording. It was a quiet melody, soft and haunting, almost like a lullaby, playing in the background. Conrad's heart skipped a beat. The melody seemed to be coming from nowhere. No instruments, no speakers, just an ethereal, almost mystical tune that filled the silence of the barn. It wasn't loud or intrusive, but it was there, and it seemed to be guiding Zephyr's movements. The horse began to move again, this time with even more fluidity, his body flowing with the rhythm of the unseen music. Conrad sat back, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This was no ordinary horse. There was something far deeper going on here, something far beyond natural behavior. He knew that horses were capable of amazing things. Tricks, training, even synchronized movements when guided by a skilled trainer. But this was different. Zephyr wasn't just following commands. He wasn't merely reacting to cues from Conrad. He was performing as if he had been taught a routine, choreographed to the rhythm of a music that wasn't even there. As the camera continued to roll, Zephyr's performance became even more elaborate. He moved across the barn floor, his movements now becoming a full-blown routine, like a horse in a circus or on a stage, displaying a level of grace and coordination that seemed almost human. He trotted, spun, and even leaped in time with the haunting melody, his body responding as if in perfect harmony with the sound. The barn walls, the hay scattered across the floor, and the shadows cast by the moonlight all seemed to blend into the background, as if the world had momentarily faded away, leaving only Zephyr and his mysterious performance. Conrad's mind raced, but the strangest part was yet to come. Just as the performance reached its peak, Zephyr halted suddenly, his hooves striking the barn floor with a sharp sound that echoed in the stillness of the night. He stood there, perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the camera once again. The eerie calm of the moment was broken only by the steady rise and fall of Zephyr's breath. And then, just as the camera clicked off, the melody, so subtle and haunting, faded away, leaving the barn in complete silence once more. Conrad sat frozen in disbelief, replaying the footage over and over, each time more astounded by what he had witnessed. Zephyr, a horse he had known for months, had somehow managed to perform a highly sophisticated routine, synchronized with a melody no one could see. How was this possible? What was going on? And most importantly, how had Zephyr learned to do this? He checked the barn again, searching for any clues. There were no speakers hidden in the rafters, no signs of any hidden technology that could have produced the melody. Zephyr's performance couldn't be explained by simple training or coincidence. Something else was at work here, something that transcended the boundaries of what Conrad had ever thought possible. The implications were staggering. Zephyr was not just a horse. He was an enigma, a creature with abilities that defied all logic and understanding. As Conrad watched the footage again, a sense of awe filled him. He realized that what he had stumbled upon was far beyond the ordinary. Zephyr wasn't just an extraordinary horse. He was part of a mystery that no one had ever anticipated. A mystery that was only just beginning to unfold. As the footage continued to roll, Conrad's eyes widened with disbelief. The simple, logical explanation he had hoped for was slipping further away with every passing second. What had started as a faint inkling of mystery quickly evolved into something far beyond what he could have ever imagined. The footage of Zephyr dancing to an invisible tune, his hooves moving in a perfect rhythm, felt almost too surreal to believe. Conrad's breath caught in his throat as the footage revealed more and more of Zephyr's performance. His movements were so precise, so deliberate, that Conrad could no longer deny the reality of what he was witnessing. This wasn't just a trick. This wasn't just a random, odd behavior from a restless horse. It was a performance, a perfectly orchestrated sequence of steps and motions that looked more like an intricate ballet than anything a horse should be capable of. For a moment, Conrad sat there, frozen, as the meaning of what he had just witnessed began to sink in. He replayed the footage, pausing it at various points to examine the fine details. Zephyr was so focused, so graceful, that it was almost as if the horse had been trained in a way Conrad had never seen before. His body moved with a fluidity that seemed to transcend natural instinct, as though the horse was following a complex choreography. His eyes narrowed as he analyzed each moment of the footage, trying to make sense of it. Conrad's mind raced as he tried to wrap his head around what was unfolding before him. How was this possible? Could Zephyr have been secretly trained without him noticing? Or was something more extraordinary at play? The idea that a horse could have such mastery over his body, moving with such elegance and coordination, defied everything Conrad thought he knew about the animal kingdom. He had always admired Zephyr for his strength and intelligence, but this was something else entirely. The most incredible part, however, came when Zephyr paused in the middle of his performance, his head turning slowly toward the camera. It was as if the horse knew he was being watched, as though he understood that his every move was being recorded. The thought sent a shiver down Conrad's spine. It was clear now. This was no accident. The mystery was real. Zephyr had been hiding something extraordinary, and Conrad had just unlocked the first part of the puzzle. The weight of the discovery hit Conrad hard. He had always believed Zephyr was just a horse, strong, loyal, and dependable. But this footage revealed something deeper, something far more intriguing. Zephyr wasn't just a companion. He was a creature of mystery, capable of far more than Conrad had ever imagined. The disbelief that had initially gripped him slowly began to turn into pure amazement. What kind of horse could do this? And why? Conrad's mind raced with questions, but one thing was certain. What he had just uncovered would change everything. The bond he shared with Zephyr had always been strong, but now it was something even more profound. This horse was no ordinary animal. There was something mystical, something inexplicable about him. Something Conrad had to figure out. He couldn't ignore it any longer. The mystery was just beginning. As Conrad sat back in his chair, replaying the footage of Zephyr's incredible performance, an overwhelming realization began to settle over him. What had started as simple curiosity was now something far more profound. Zephyr wasn't just a horse. He was something extraordinary, something far beyond the ordinary capabilities of any animal. But as Conrad watched the footage again, something else became clear. This wasn't just about Zephyr's remarkable talents. It was about their bond, the connection they shared. Conrad had always felt a special connection to Zephyr, even before he had witnessed the miraculous performance on the camera. When he first brought Zephyr to the farm, he had been just another horse in a long line of animals he had cared for over the years. But something about this horse was different. From the very first day, Zephyr had a presence that went beyond that of any other horse Conrad had known. There was a quiet intelligence in his eyes, an understanding that seemed almost human. At first, Conrad thought it was just his imagination, but the more he worked with Zephyr, the more he realized that there was something unique about this horse, a connection that was deeper than just caretaker and animal. It wasn't until that fateful night, when the camera had captured Zephyr's mysterious behavior, that Conrad began to understand the true extent of their bond. There was a synchronicity between them that defied explanation. The way Zephyr responded to the music, whether it was real or imagined, was something beyond mere instinct. It was as if the horse had learned to move to a rhythm that only he could hear, and that rhythm was something Conrad had never noticed before. But what struck Conrad the most was how in tune Zephyr seemed to be with him. The horse's movements were not just graceful, they were purposeful. Every step, every leap, every pause seemed deliberate, as though Zephyr was not just performing for an invisible audience, but for Conrad himself. The realization hit hard. Zephyr had been trying to communicate something beyond simple actions or behavior. It was as if the horse had been showing him, through his dance and his awareness of the camera, that their connection went far deeper than what Conrad had ever imagined. It was this deeper connection, this unspoken understanding, that changed everything. Conrad had always viewed animals with respect, but now he was beginning to see them in a new light. Zephyr wasn't just a companion to care for and train. He was an intelligent, sentient being with emotions, desires, and a connection to the world around him that Conrad could never have guessed. The bond they shared wasn't just about feeding and grooming. It was about communication on a level that transcended language or behavior. Zephyr was showing Conrad a new way of seeing the world, a new way of understanding animals, and it was a revelation that would forever alter their relationship. As Conrad watched Zephyr's performance one last time, the realization struck him with the force of a thunderbolt. What they had was not just a simple bond between a man and his horse. It was a partnership, a mutual respect, and a deeper connection that went beyond anything Conrad could have predicted. Zephyr was no longer just a horse to him. He was a partner, a creature with abilities and intelligence that Conrad had barely begun to understand. The connection between them was unlike anything Conrad had experienced before, and he knew that he would never look at Zephyr the same way again. What had started as a simple bond had evolved into something more powerful, more profound, and more mysterious than Conrad could have ever imagined. The truth about Zephyr was only beginning to reveal itself, but one thing was clear. Their relationship was destined for something far greater than Conrad had ever expected. As Conrad sat back in the quiet of his barn, surrounded by the stillness of the night, his mind swirled with the revelations he had just uncovered. What had started as a seemingly small mystery had unraveled into something far more profound than he could have ever imagined. Zephyr, the horse he had always considered just a companion, had proven to be a creature of incredible depth and mystery. The footage had shown Conrad that there was so much more to Zephyr than he had ever realized. something that transcended the boundaries of natural behavior and ordinary understanding. Conrad had always known that animals were capable of amazing things. He had cared for countless horses, dogs, and other creatures over the years, and he had seen their intelligence, their loyalty, and their capacity for emotion. But Zephyr was different. This horse had shown him that animals weren't just creatures to be trained or cared for. They were beings with their own thoughts, their own ways of understanding the world. And through the strange, mesmerizing performance Zephyr had delivered that night, he had proven that his connection to Conrad was something truly special. As Conrad reflected on the footage, he couldn't help but marvel at how much Zephyr had taught him. It wasn't just about the incredible performance. It was about the unspoken bond between them, the deep understanding that seemed to go beyond the ordinary. The fact that Zephyr had been performing for him, had been aware of the camera, had been trying to communicate something, this was the part that truly struck Conrad. It was as if Zephyr had been waiting for the right moment to show Conrad just how much he understood, how much he had to offer. The depth of their connection had been there all along, but it had taken a moment of revelation for Conrad to truly see it. In the end, Conrad understood that the mystery of Zephyr was not just about the strange performance he had witnessed on the camera. It was about something far more meaningful, the trust, the respect, and the bond they shared. Zephyr had shown Conrad a new way of seeing the world, a new way of understanding the creatures with whom he shared his life. Their relationship was no longer just that of a caretaker and an animal. It had evolved into something far more profound, something that would shape their future together. Conrad didn't have all the answers. The mystery of Zephyr was far from solved. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the journey they had started together, the unexplained moments, the connection that went beyond words or logic. The discovery had been a revelation, but the true magic lay in what it had done for their bond. It had shown Conrad that there was more to life and to animals than what met the eye. And with that knowledge, he couldn't wait to see what the future would hold for him and Zephyr. As the barn grew quieter, and the last traces of the strange melody faded into memory, Conrad smiled, knowing that his life and his connection to Zephyr would never be the same. The incredible story of Zephyr's hidden talents and the mysterious bond he shared with Conrad has only just begun. If you've been captivated by this extraordinary horse and his secret performance, then don't let this mystery end here. We encourage you to take a moment to reflect on the relationships you share with the animals in your life. Are there hidden depths waiting to be discovered? Could your bond with your pets or companions go beyond what you've ever imagined? If you enjoyed this story and want to uncover more awe-inspiring tales of animal mysteries and extraordinary connections, make sure to subscribe to our channel. By hitting the bell icon, you'll be notified every time we release a new video packed with incredible true stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to like and share this video with your friends and family who love animals and the mysteries of the world around us. You never know. Maybe someone you know has their own hidden stories to share, and together, we can explore the amazing secrets that nature holds. Have any thoughts or questions about Zephyr and his mesmerizing performance? Leave a comment below and join the conversation. We'd love to hear what you think, and your feedback might just inspire our next incredible story. And remember, the journey of discovery is far from over. Zephyr has shown us that there's always more to uncover, more to learn, and more ways to connect. Stay tuned for more stories that reveal the hidden magic of the animal world.